Ed Markey's description of that briefing, and we'll ask Senator Markey if he thinks enough Republicans will vote to subpoena John Bolton to testify in the Senate impeachment trial. Today, Nancy Pelosi divided her public comments about equally between what she called the two I's, Iran and impeachment. Once again tonight, the articles of impeachment will spend the night in the House of Representatives in the custody of Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Here's what she said today about why she has not sent the articles of impeachment against President Trump to the United States Senate for trial.
So are you going to hold the articles indefinitely?
No, I'm not holding them indefinitely. I'll send them over when I'm ready. And that will probably be soon. We want to see what they're willing to do and the manner in which they will do it. But we will not let them say, oh, this is just like Clinton, fair is fair. It's not. Documentation, witnesses, facts, truth. That's what they're afraid of.
Earlier this week, a few, and only a few, Democratic senators started to make public comments suggesting that Nancy Pelosi should send the articles of impeachment to the Senate now. But today, Democratic senators are now all fully supportive of Speaker Pelosi's strategy.
Would you like to see the Speaker send the articles over now?
Well, I think that's up to the Speaker.
Should the articles of impeachment be sent over to the Senate now?
It's appropriate for Speaker Pelosi to do everything she can to secure witnesses. Given the public statements of Leader McConnell yesterday, I expect this is going to move forward fairly quickly, but I fully respect the prerogative of the Leader of the House to ensure that there is as fair a trial as we could possibly secure.
You told us yesterday that you support Pelosi sending the articles over. A few of your Democratic colleagues have echoed the same. Have you heard from any other Democratic colleagues that it's time to kind of get on with the trial?
What I've heard from my Democratic colleagues very emphatically is profound respect for the Speaker's decision. She has waited, and the result has been additional evidence.
So they're all back in line with Speaker Pelosi now, after there was a few wanderings off in their own directions. President Trump continued to engage in his jury tampering strategy by meeting with Senator Mitch McConnell yesterday at the White House, where they, according to a source, discussed the format of the Senate trial. And Senator McConnell gave the president his current reading of where the Republican jurors stand in the trial that hasn't yet begun. As Mitch McConnell's impatience with Nancy Pelosi's holding on to the articles of impeachment grows, today, Mitch McConnell said this.
If the Speaker continues to refuse to take her own accusations to trial, the Senate will move forward next week with the business of our people.
Okay, so there's the threat. And the people's business that Mitch McConnell said the Senate would turn to next week, if they're not ready to go to trial on the impeachment case, is the revised version of NAFTA, which just passed the Republican-controlled Senate Finance Committee just this week, and is not ready to go to the Senate floor because the other committees of jurisdiction in the Senate are moving so slowly. Nancy Pelosi, on the other hand, got the revised version of NAFTA, passed through all of the committees of jurisdiction in the House, and passed on the House floor last year. And like virtually everything else the Pelosi-run House of Representatives has passed and sent to the Senate, the revised version of NAFTA is still waiting for action in the United States Senate. So when Mitch McConnell threatened today to turn to doing the people's business if he doesn't get the articles of impeachment next week, Nancy Pelosi said this.
He said, if you don't send them over, I'm going to pass the Mexico-U.S.-Canada trade agreement. Okay.
Mitch McConnell cannot threaten Nancy Pelosi by saying he's going to pass the legislation that she has sent to the Senate and wants him to pass. That kind of threat will give Nancy Pelosi the incentive to hold the articles of impeachment even longer. One reason Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump desperately want the articles of impeachment sent to the United States Senate immediately is what has happened in the time that Nancy Pelosi has been holding on to those articles.
In the past few weeks, since we've had this, shall we say, impasse, because they won't reveal the terms of engagement, many things have been accomplished that are collateral benefit to the discussion. And they relate to, on December 20th, new emails showed that 91 minutes after Trump's phone call with the Ukrainian president, a top OMB aide asked DOD to hold off on sending military aid to the Ukraine, directly related to that call. On December 29th, it was public revelations about Mulvaney's role in the delay of the aid, the effort of lawyers at OMB, DOJ, and White House to justify the delay, and the alarm that the delay caused within the administration. Last Thursday, newly unredacted Pentagon emails exposed serious concerns by administration officials about the legality of the president's hold on the aid. And just this week, Bolton announced that he would comply with a subpoena compelling his testimony. His lawyers have stated he has new relevant information.
Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur of Ohio. She is the co-chair of the House Ukraine Caucus, and her district includes Toledo, Ohio, where President Trump held a campaign rally tonight. Jason Johnson is the politics editor of TheRoot.com and a professor of politics and media at Morgan State University. And Eugene Robinson is the associate editor and Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for The Washington Post. Both Jason and Eugene are MSNBC political analysts. And Congresswoman Kaptur, first of all, I want to go to what the reaction was in the House of Representatives in the last couple of days when you started to hear senators like Richard Blumenthal and a few others saying Speaker Pelosi should send us the articles of impeachment now. They have reversed themselves, the ones who started to say those things, because it seems Speaker Pelosi is in complete control of what this strategy is. What was your reaction in the House when you heard those senators start to make their own suggestions about it?
Well, let me just say that I think that it's very important that we create a process whereby the truth can be known. And the administration obstructed justice on so many levels in terms of witnesses who were to come before us, before our committees, of travel logs and meetings that were held relative to Ukraine and the withholding of aid to Ukraine. We were not able to assemble that information in the House. So I think what the Speaker is doing is very proper, and I'm glad to see that the Senate, which was less focused on what we've been doing in the House, are paying attention and seeing that this temporary pause is an effort to obtain the truth. And I think when John Bolton came out and made some indications that he was willing to come and testify, I think that began to move the dial.
And is it also part of the Speaker's strategy to, because the State of the Union address is scheduled for February 4th, to delay this trial long enough so that Donald Trump does not have a verdict from that trial before the State of the Union address?
Well, that sounds like a good strategy to me.
So you think it's politically wise to play the politics of that scheduling, and even if that becomes publicly apparent that that's what the Speaker is doing, that there's a political element to the scheduling so that the president doesn't have the kind of State of the Union address that he might want to have?
Well, everything that we do is political, but I think that if we can, in fact, have clarity from the Senate a little bit more on the kinds of witnesses they will call, what we were not able to do in the House, which is so vital to making sure that we abide by the strictures of the Constitution. No one is above the law. I can tell you, in terms of my own committee, the fact that Secretary Perry, who led the U.S. delegation to Ukraine back in May when the new president of Ukraine was sworn in, and he was unwilling to give us his travel logs. He was unwilling to tell us with whom he met, what he did. Informally, he would say things to me. He would never say it on the record, and he's left the administration. Oh, my goodness. That is really, the American people deserve to know what these individuals who are Trump appointees were doing and who they were speaking with, particularly in view of the fact that this military aid was then withheld. We simply don't know, and we need to know, and we don't have that evidence.
Gene Robinson, as I watched this strategy play out, I was surprised as anyone that Nancy Pelosi decided to hold on to the articles of impeachment. I couldn't have told you exactly what the strategy is. I still can't. However, when I see it has driven Mitch McConnell to go to the Senate floor and threaten Nancy Pelosi by saying, if you don't give me the articles of impeachment, I'm going to do exactly what you want me to do. And start,
Exactly.
I mean, Mitch McConnell's lost on this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he keeps going to the floor and trying to say something that will dislodge these articles. And what Nancy Pelosi is doing is essentially, for whatever reason, I confess, I'm not sure I understand. Actually, I'm sure I don't understand fully her strategy, but what she's doing is what Mitch McConnell does, which is just to be stubborn and not to care what sort of attack she had. That's what McConnell does all the time. Mitch don't care, and he's been very successful that way. Nancy Pelosi is basically doing the same thing, and she essentially said, "Read my lips today. I'll send them when I'm ready," and I gather that's exactly what she's going to do, and there's nothing Mitch McConnell really can do about that.
And Jason Johnson, you can see the shape of some of the strategy, but I'm sure Nancy Pelosi has more in mind than I can see. One of those things is that moment where she just said, okay, here's all the stuff we've learned since the articles of impeachment passed. We've learned all this while I've been holding on to them, and as this Senate trial is waiting to get started. Also, you look at what Mitt Romney said about he's completely in favor of witnesses testifying, John Bolton in particular. I mean, he's basically said, I am a vote for that. There's at least one Republican vote for that. So far, I don't see any price Nancy Pelosi is paying here in holding on to these, and I can see what she's been gaining so far.
Right, Lawrence, why throw pearls before swine? There's no reason for her to give this report, give the articles of impeachment over to Mitch McConnell so he can throw them in the circular file, because she knows that's what he's going to want to do. The longer that Nancy Pelosi has waited, not only have we gotten additional information, but it increases the likelihood that Chuck Schumer and other Democrats, despite some rumbling this week, will have a stronger hand in negotiating how the eventual trial occurs. And that's the most important thing here. It doesn't really matter when the articles of impeachment come over, as long as the process is one that everybody can agree with. And I don't care if that happens in February. I don't care if that happens in March. Even the Democrats who are running for president right now have realized that there's a value to being actively involved in this process, even if they're campaigning. So I think it's been a smart idea. I wish the Democrats in the Senate had kept their mouths quiet, because obviously they were getting a little nervous for reasons that make no sense. But ultimately, this is a good idea on Pelosi's part. And another example, and I also have to say this quickly, Mitch McConnell did this all the time. He held up Merrick Garland. How can anyone complain about what Nancy Pelosi is doing when hundreds of judges under the Obama administration were held without a position under Mitch McConnell?
Well, another thing that happened today, Congressman Kaptur, while Nancy Pelosi has been holding on the articles, is that buried in a bunch of inanity that Donald Trump spoke today at an impromptu public discussion in front of reporters, I don't want to call it a press conference, which included praise for the Village People and their gay anthem YMCA, which we will get to later in the program and show you. In the middle of all of that, when he was asked about John Bolton testifying, he said that it was okay with him. He had no problem with it. He just wants to protect executive privilege. So he just, in that moment, released his directive to John Bolton to not testify. So the door has become even wider open to John Bolton's testimony.
We welcome John Bolton. I hope that he will come before the Senate.
And what about the House? Will the House also try to get Bolton testimony at some point?
I would welcome that. I'm not on any of those committees of jurisdiction. All I know is that the situation with Ukraine is extremely serious. It is the scrimmage line for liberty in Europe today. Russia is working in many malign ways in adjoining countries, and frankly in this country through cyber warfare and so forth, to create disunity and to disrupt our normal order of doing business. And they're very serious. They want to break up our NATO alliance. They have invaded several countries, including Ukraine most recently, in order to prevent accession to the greater European Union and ultimately to NATO. And this is serious. This is serious security business for our country and for liberty-loving people everywhere. So I think that we have to look below some of the theatrical politics here and think about strategically what is at stake for us and the tremendous price that this country has paid for the liberty of our allies.
The co-chair of the House Ukraine Caucus, Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur, Eugene Robinson, Jason Johnson, thank you all for joining us and starting us off tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks,
And
Mark.
coming up.